QEM has, is it 5 now?
He has quite a few.
Yeah, several.
Three sites, yeah.
Right, so UHF and 900 megahertz?
VHF,
okay.
900.
Very good. So it's spread all around the place. So, we have some handouts, and if you didn't already, a really good resource in our area for DMR information is the DMR VA website.
Yeah.
There should be a link in there, I think, maybe? Yep, there is. And repeater book and other things. So, like I said, this is going to be very informal. And just so you know, Vienna Wireless Society is stepping up the technology, and we are live streaming from 2 cameras, and we are filming for potential YouTube publication if we don't mess up too bad tonight. So take it away, whatever.
Well, okay. Thanks, Brendan and everyone. I just wanted to come back. There are a lot of questions that came out after our meeting about a month ago, and I've heard quite a few new voices on the DMR system, so that's great. And I kind of want to leave this an open forum. I made up a little guide to follow along, which hopefully might bring some more specifics into light about. So I'll ask the question I did before. Maybe we'll get a few more hands since this is a focused group. Does anybody here have a DMR radio already? Okay. Interested in learning about it, or might get one in the future? Okay. All right. Brandon's going to buy 2 more. So I thought what we could do is kind of open this as a forum to talk a little bit more about DMR. I'll share with you what I know and take some information to follow up if there's follow-up questions. I think starting a thread on your VWS general forum might be good to get some questions answered and things in a public space. But DMR programming is a little bit different than analog radio programming. If you buy a Yaesu or Kenwood ham radio, you basically need to know frequency, offset, and PL tone or CTCSS, and you can get just about anything done. With DMR, you will need to know a little bit more information about the system you're trying to interoperate with. The repeaters are IP based, and so as such, the connections between the radio to the repeater are a little bit more complex and are a little bit more. There's a little bit more information exchange than just voice packets. So let's see. Why don't I start with just a little bit of basics, and I think a whiteboard is a great forum for that. Oh, they put all the chalk away. But
I got a shirt. I have one.
oh, dry erase by any chance?
Yeah, let's use permanent ink on the whiteboard.
Well, then every student.
Okay, there's a green and a brown, or a black rather.
Okay. I'm not surprised because people probably take things after school ends and they don't want me like talking along the way. So okay, so a DMR code plug is made up of a number of things. Yeah, all blue as well. My name's Ben. Yeah, by the way. I've got at least three cameras on. So in order to just like in conventional modes, you need to know which band you're operating on. DMR generally is in 2 meters, 440, and 900 megahertz. And then from there you need to know the frequency you're operating on, and that can be simplex. Simplex at the very basic level, or repeater. And then and as we talked about during the forum, in each 12.5 kilohertz repeater assignment, we actually have 2 talk paths. They're divided in time by time slots, which are 30 milliseconds long. So the benefit to that is you can carry 2 conversations at the same time on one piece of repeater hardware, antenna, and duplexer. So you need to be able to differentiate which time slot you're operating on. And again, there's 2, and that's the basic. The next thing you need to know is the talk group you want to operate on. And even if you're not operating on a common talk group or one that is shared over the internet, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes, even if you're not operating on a shared talk group, you still have to assign a number. Think of it as a broadcast address to which you're going to transmit to. So So talk group / talk group ID. And then from that, after that, you need to, there's the very basics of information, and you're going to assign a variety of these things into channels. And then the channels will be organized into zones in your radio. And that's the way that commercial radios are generally programmed, so including DMR technology. So some other terms that are on the sheets and hopefully defined okay are your radio ID. And that's a start. So the way you can think of it is you in a digital transmission, you need to, every packet needs to have a source and a destination address. And so the source address is generally is your radio ID, and the destination address is another radio ID. Radio IDs can either be individual or a group.
So, Ben, the radio ID is that number that you have gotten assigned to you. It doesn't really have anything to do with this physical radio.
That's right. Okay. So the radio ID is the like you mentioned, the ID that's assigned to you, and is stored in your radio as a number. So 6 digits. 6 digits. So mine I think is 3151.
Mine's 7. Mine's 7.
It is 7.
Yeah, it's 7. 3151469 I think is mine. The way that the first line here is everybody needs to get a radio ID. And even if you don't have a DMR radio, it's not a bad idea to register for one, because you'll get yourself in the database with a nice low number, and before this takes off globally, which it already has. And then the other thing is you will have, even if you don't have a radio now, if somebody says, hey, we're going to operate this event, and here's a radio you can use, some radios do allow you, I think, to manipulate that on the fly, or you could program it in, or have them program your ID in for you. The radio ID is stored in the radio. It's not, and broadcast, your call sign does not go over the air in any text string manner, so you're not actually identifying legally when you're transmitting. The radio ID on the other end, on the receiving end, either be an individual or a group. When they receive that, they map it. Your radio will have the database in it that you put in, and it'll map back to the list of call signs. So when you receive a from address of 3151469, your radio is going to look that up and say that's N4CB, or that guy that keeps coming to our meetings and telling us about DMR, whatever you want to make it say, name, call sign.
So I know you and I have talked briefly about this, but I just want to point out that there is actually Talker Alias that's now supported.
Okay.
And it's on the Brandmeister website. When you create an account on there, so Hytera supports technology called Talker Alias, which is like D-Star. It simultaneously transmits your name, whatever you tell it to transmit, but it'll relate your call sign to your DMR ID. So there is, if you have Hytera radios, and you program it into your code plug, by default, you will, talking to another Hytera radio on a Hytera repeater, it will transmit that information. The two big repeaters out there are Motorola and Hytera, so there's a good chance that you're going to find a Hytera repeater out there somewhere. But if you have like an MD390 or 380 or any of these other really inexpensive Chinese radios that are making DMR very popular right now, you're more than likely going to be operating for part of the time on the Brandmeister network, especially if you use a hotspot at home or mobile. And in the Brandmeister web infrastructure, you can fill in 2 fields, and one would be your name and your call sign. And when you push to talk, so long as the environment you're talking in supports it, Brandmeister now supports it, you will see the caller information. The other radios that don't support that, you need to load your contact lists up with contacts, or in the case of the MD380 or 390, you can download, if you load, what is it, the MD380 tools, the alternate firmware package. Every day you can do an update on your radio and push any new database IDs that are added to the database. You can download a really small, comma separated file, and it automatically maps names to numbers. So like on a D-Star radio, when I press to talk, you might not see it on your Motorola radio, but on an MD380, if it's programmed properly, he'll see Brendan KM4HRR scroll across the screen. So anyway, just a little interjection there.
And by program properly, you mean I manually typed it in myself.
Correct.
So every code plug programming software is a little bit different, and the Motorola ones are pretty hard to get information in and out of.
It would appear I accidentally walked into an advanced calculus class.
Right.
So
That's why
are you saying that one could infer from what you're saying that you cannot talk on the radio unless you're using your own radio ID?
That is, for best operating practices, a true statement. When you buy the radio, it'll come 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as the radio ID, or 99999. And the repeater owners have blocked those numbers because they want you to at least go the step of identifying yourself. Because if everybody had the same ID, they wouldn't be able to differentiate users. A receiving user wouldn't be able to differentiate any of the other users. And the other thing that offers is, in fact, earlier versions of the Motorola firmware and some other radios will not even open the squelch for a radio ID that's the same as the receiving ID is the same as the sending ID. So if I buy my radio out of the box and start talking on it, and you do the same thing, it's possible that your transmissions would never open the squelch or come out of the speaker of my radio because it's ignored it. So Brendan brought up a couple of advanced topics, which I was going to mention at the end of the meeting, or not really planned, but didn't want to quite confuse with the MD380 tools. There are some people that are doing some projects, have done projects where they've actually modified the firmware in the radio and opened up a new memory space to store the worldwide database, which is pretty cool. So if you have an MD380, like from Titera and TYT, check it out and use at your own risk. Yeah.
You know, most of us have entered the individual ID that we've gotten. How could I enter a group ID? For example, I don't know, how do you get it? Could VWS have a group?
So the difference here is that every individual has their individual ID, and a talk group is stored in the same format as a group call. So radio ID kind of breaks down to individual call and group call. So, for example, you may be familiar with Virginia statewide. So I'll give you an example, but mine was 3151469. But Virginia statewide has numbers 3151. So when you program your group, when you create a group, a contact list in your radio, you're going to enter this with an individual's name, and group call will be Virginia statewide. And the point I was getting across is the numbers are very similar in format. They're all a numeric number, and they're stored in the same list. So it's kind of easy there's a drop-down menu when you create the contact if you want it to be an individual or a group. So the interesting thing is that you don't always have to transmit to a group call. For ease of interoperation, there are lots of group calls out there that are predefined, and you'll see them on the when you go look at repeater and you see these. Hey, we carry 3151, we carry 99, we carry TAC 312. But you have to program a radio to transmit out to that group. You can program a radio to talk to one person. So if Brendan and I were operating Simplex and I wanted to put his radio in as my to, and me would be my from field in my channel, we can operate, and even if somebody is in a catch-all listening to everything DMR mode, they hear us, but when they try to talk back to us, my radio is squelching on him and he's squelching on me. Yes?
Are you saying that if we call 3151, everyone in Virginia will hear that?
So those talk groups are picked up when they are received at the repeater. They're retransmitted locally, but they also go to the C bridge or a bridge which is multiple repeaters plug into and over the internet. And when my radio, or when your radio transmits into the repeater and its to address is 3151, the repeater will pick that up, retransmit it, and if I'm listening on 3151 in Vienna, I'll hear it. And if I'm listening on 3151 in Roanoke, where there's another repeater, it'll also come out there. But if I transmit it on 3152 group, which is not one of the registered ones that's on this local repeater, it would not go out over any of the local statewide repeaters.
So it sounds like the answer was yes. That-
So
yes.
there's repeaters, right, which I can talk to locally, and if you're on the same repeater and linked to the same talk group, we can talk locally. But then there's talk groups, which may or may not be linked to repeaters, right? So statewide in general, whether it's Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Idaho, whatever, a large subset of the repeaters in each of those states will be linked to their own state talk group and adjoining jurisdictions talk groups, right?
So anyone,
So you go to Idaho and-
anyone tuned to 3151 would hear that.
Well, any repeater that's linked to 3151 and any user that's push to talk and link to 3151, whether it's through a hotspot, a repeater, or, you know, any other way,
All right.
will hear that.
All right, thank
Does
you.
that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So just kind of in summary, we can have multiple repeaters hanging off of one C bridge, and this is the router. My handy talkie, I go into the repeater on a talk group that this repeater recognizes, 3151. It retransmits that packet out to a local user, but it also forwards it down to the C bridge where it goes out to all these other repeaters simultaneously. And so, you know, just like we have multiple repeaters, then there's multiple C bridges in existence. This one is in Chicago, for example. If I, instead of using 3151, I've chosen to use a group like 312, which is one of the nationwide, worldwide TAC channels, talk around channels or tactical channels. If I go in 312, my group is, my transmission is also going to come out on 312 right locally, but it's going to go into the C bridge, and then it's going to go over the internet in 312 to all of these other C bridges, and their repeaters are also going to retransmit. So there's a couple group numbers that are worldwide, and theoretically, if you were to key up here in Vienna on one of the worldwide channels, you could key up thousands of repeaters around the world. So any questions so far on this? Yeah.
If I'm ahead of you, just say so, but if I wanted to talk to you, I can do that simplex by setting up a contact with your number in it, and then a channel with the frequency we've agreed upon use.
Right.
But can I talk to you through the repeater, direct from my radio to yours, without using one of these standard talk groups?
That's a good question, and that depends on how the local repeater's configured. So in many cases it will. In many cases, at the most basic case, if you had an emergency comm repeater you set out there and you didn't put any rules in it to filter anything, and it didn't have a network connection, you would be able to use it on any valid group. It's literally it's creating a message. I'm sending you your number a message from my number, and it happens to go through two repeaters between the two of you to get to you. Versus if all of you are in Virginia and I'm in Idaho, and I can get into, and my Idaho repeater carries the Virginia group, I'll hit my local Idaho repeater, which will hit the C bridge, and then all of you will hear me. So both modes will work, but generally repeaters won't forward the local, the individual.
Not like FM.
I shouldn't say local. I should say individual call, not like well, correct, sure. I understand what you're saying.
So generally that doesn't work.
Generally, that doesn't work through a public repeater. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a back question first.
This is great, a lot of versatility, but it's unmanaged. And what's to prevent somebody from maliciously locking up the entire network by keying up a code and trying to transmit to all stations worldwide and blocking up the network?
Right.
What kind of things like that can happen, and how are hams addressing potential malicious things on the network? We have bad enough time with people for chunking, you know, this is like on steroids, looks like.
Right, especially as you've chained all these repeaters together, and some states have analog combined statewide FM, and you key up in one place and you're tying up all these repeaters. So the way that the C bridges are programmed, actually the repeater master is programmed, is that the most talk groups are not always active on a given repeater. So when you go to one of the resources that I mentioned on here, either DMR Mark repeater book, which most people are familiar with, and DMR Virginia is the Virginia one, you'll see a list of talk groups. And those talk groups are offered by that repeater, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if I turn my radio on to 312 and I sit in my armchair listening to 312 that I'll hear anything. Almost every talk group carried by a repeater are set up on a PTT activation. So the repeater in Herndon is going to sit quietly, even though there's other chatter going on 312, nation or worldwide, until I, as the user, have identified, hey, I want to listen to 312. And by doing that, you key up. Now, this goes kind of against what we're all used to with good amateur practice of not per chunking, but it's actually worse practice to key up and say I'm listening or I'm monitoring, because as soon as you key up, your transmission on 312 is going to go hit the network, and if there was already chatter going on, you're going to cause a contention on the network. So it's actually better in this case to just key up for 1 second or so and unkey and listen and make sure that the channel is clear before you make your call. So does that answer your question?
Well, not entirely, but that's okay.
Okay.
There'll be a lot of.
Sure, it'll time out.
About
So then it'll time out generally in 2 or 5 minutes, again, whatever the repeater owner has set it to. So the exceptions to that are any local channels. Those are always on, but those are also local to one repeater or a small repeater group. And then the statewide channels, generally, I was having a conversation on the statewide repeater over here. The person I was talking to was not on my local repeater, so we chose to stay on the statewide channel. But my transmissions were going out in Richmond, even though he was actually he was a club member, AA1RB of yours, and he said to say hi to Ray. And we were tying up all of the Virginia statewide, any repeater that was listening to Virginia statewide, we were tying up that resource while we had our rag chew, which is okay. But if it was going to be a long conversation or more than 10 minutes or so, we would move to one of the lesser used and PTT activated talk groups, so that I would not tie up the repeater during that time. So that's how group calls hit a repeater, are transmitted to a C bridge and shared between other C bridges. And when you start looking at repeaters, you'll find that there are a lot of groups in common between different repeaters. You had a question?
Yeah, it was similar to his question. With those hotspots that you plug into your computer, if, let's say, I had one and my friend across the country had one, would we be able to set up kind of like an over-the-internet simplex and talk directly to each other through the hotspots, or does it not work that way?
Might be a better question for you.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
So most of the hotspots operate in what's called the Brandmeister network. And the Brandmeister network has one of the differences between a local repeater. Many repeaters either operate on a C bridge or individually managed C bridges, or they operate on the Brandmeister network. So our local C bridge would carry only about perhaps 15 or 20 different channels, talk groups that it offers. Whereas the Brandmeister network has, I think, hundreds, and anybody accessing either a Brandmeister repeater or a Brandmeister hotspot can literally program that I want to talk on, Kentucky statewide from your easy chair, and
So you could do a private call.
Yeah.
Through a hotspot or through a repeater or through a talk group or
So if I typed in my friend's DMR
So if you went into your
Private
contact
call.
list and instead of calling up a contact that saved, you said like, I think it's called like, enter individual or something like that. So like a couple menu buttons in, you would put in his DMR ID or my DMR ID, regardless of where you are. And if my radio is on, and we're on the same network, then it should work.
Okay.
So my question then to pose, and might require some experimentation, is what's the difference between making an individual call to you on the repeater versus programming that in ahead of time and having a channel that has you as my destination instead of individual calls to destination? So
the only
have to
difference
break
there
down
would
the
be maybe
packet.
a hotspot versus a repeater.
Okay. All right. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
Now, we
Getting
have
a lot of
something- We have
kindness.
something to go home and play with though.
Okay.
Figure out.
I do want to make sure everybody leaves feeling a little bit more comfortable in some area of DMR. If I can't help you program your radio, one-on-one. There was another question coming out over here. Yeah.
We've got a couple questions about this point. If you're talking simplex, Ross has a radio, I have a radio, I put his ID in, he has my ID. We can talk to each other directly simplex.
That's right.
We could also, we'd have to in advance though pick a channel.
That's where we're gonna go look farther down the list.
Hotspot or on the repeater, and then once in that channel, talk individual to individual, right?
I think that,
Talk group 9.
yeah, very close to your, so you're talking about simplex or through a repeater or both?
Well, the first question was
First simplex.
simplex.
So the first thing on simplex is, I'm gonna just for simplicity say that your individual numbers are 1 and 2,
Right.
and down here is number 3. So if number 1 transmits to number 2, and number 3 is set up to listen only to, generally it will only be listening out for calls that are either for 3 or a group. But if I were to transmit out, instead of to number 2, I want to transmit out to 99, let's say. You could set up these radios to listen on group 99, and they'll both unsquelch. And if everybody transmits out to 99 in this small group on simplex, you'll all hear each other and have a simplex conversation that you're used to, like on FM.
And what's 99 become a channel?
99 is a talk group number. And on every call you have a to, a from, and then your message, among some other information bits that are stuffed in there. So your 2 is always going to be the number that your individual radio ID number is always going to be you.
Isn't that from?
From, that's the from. Yep.
Yeah.
That's you. The message will be your voice packets or data or whatever you stuffed in there. And 2 is going to be either an individual that you're making a call to or a group, which equals a talk group.
But I can talk simplex individual to individual.
That's right.
And in that example up there with the 99s, we don't have to be anywhere near a repeater. We can talk simplex among the 3 of us if we're all programmed to the same.
And you're in, and you're obviously
untrainable.
And you're obviously in UHF or VHF or whatever line of sight you need.
Yeah.
But if I want to talk to another individual, I can go that on a particular frequency.
Yes.
Okay, now, if I want to talk to 4 guys, I put their numbers in, plus we all have to be on talk group 99.
Nope. Talk to 4 guys, you're going to use talk group number 99, and they're going to program their radios to listen for calls on 99, instead of needing to know who they're expecting the call from. Yeah.
Couple of, is 99 an arbitrary number that you would just make up in the field, or is that a set standard?
I use 99 because that's generally used for simplex. So 99 is a good example, but you could make up any. If you're operating on a simplex channel, you own the whole domain. You can use whatever talk group number you want to. If you're at Dayton, there's probably already going to be somebody on your frequency on 99. So you probably don't want to choose the same frequency. You're supposed to listen before you transmit and make sure the green light's on your radio showing that there's already RF activity in your radio or in the channel you're operating on. But if you guys want to make up talk group zip code 21 whatever your zip code is, and use that as your talk group ID to differentiate yourself, that's a good idea. On simplex. But if you use that zip code and try to go through a repeater, it may or may not work, and it probably won't work.
And with the talk groups, to set up a talk group, do you have to have a list of every individual's DMR ID number?
No, because you only need to send who you're sending to. You only need to know who you're sending to, and they will set their radios up to listen. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the programming method. So the first thing I mentioned, number 1, is to get your ID. Number 2 is basically getting your radio set up. I do recommend, as soon as you get your new radio and you get the USB drivers working in Chinese and all of that it required to get the radio working, download the code plug that comes in it. save it off as a place to go back to, as a starting place.
That's probably gonna be empty and not have any information in it.
Right. In fact, it will have talk group. It'll have
Basic.
it might have a couple of things. Generally, it'll come with a Simplex channel or two that's usually in a non-ham frequency, and it'll have some sort of made up or default radio ID in it.
Comment.
Yeah.
I noticed that when I downloaded the code plug from, what is it, DMR dash something or other.
DMRVA.
Yeah, that I had to have a program that read the CSV file or something. And I put that on my computer, and every time I want to update it, I just plug my phone in and have the computer read what's on the phone, and then it's in the code plug. I manipulate it and load it back into the phone, and then save a copy just in case something goes asunder. But there are really two things that I found you need. One is the program that reads the code plug, and the other is the code plug. Is that how you recall?
So you'll have what's called the customer programming software, or
That's
CPS.
it. Yes.
Generally, it's called CPS for every radio type, and you also have your code plug file, which is going to be .bat or .code plug or whatever they choose. Your manufacturer chooses to store it as. So that's kind of basic, like programming any other piece of equipment. I think many people have like an ICOM or Kenwood, and they've gotten the Chirp program, or may have purchased the ICOM or Kenwood software and a USB cable to program it. So that's not as new to most of us. The next thing you need to do is, before you do anything, again, I stressed, make sure your radio ID is programmed into the General Settings tab near the top of the list in the settings. And then one of the other rules they require is turning off automatic registration service, which is a value-added feature that some manufacturers participate in, but it causes unnecessary data traffic over the network. So go out to your favorite source of repeater listings. DMR Mark is it's Motorola Amateur Radio Club, and that's one of the Seabridge operators and one of the large groups of DMR repeaters out there. DMR Virginia, DMRVA.org is our local one, and there's a lot more local information on there. So I recommend starting small, and also don't try to program your radio to operate on every DMR channel and repeater and talk group offering in the country, because you'll run out of space and then things change. So DMRVA is a nice website to go to, because they'll publish on their main page when they've made changes or things like that.
They also, just to show them that real quick.
Yeah.
If you go to DMRVA and go to the Talk Groups tab, Steve actually started this format, right? So there's a spreadsheet, and you can come up and look at this on your way out or whatever, but it's a really nice layout, logical layout of vertically all the repeaters. This is for this area right here, and then horizontally the repeaters, and then vertically all the talk groups that are associated with that particular repeater and time slots that they're in. So time slot 1, time slot 2, and then in red, the ones that are always on, that you don't need to push to talk to activate. The ones in yellow, they have timers, so once you push to talk, most of them are going to be 5-minute timers. So if there's no activity on that talk group that you key up on for 5 minutes, some of them are 15, you'll unlink from that, so it'll be quiet. You don't expect to hear anything. But very logically laid out and easy to understand spreadsheets there for programming by hand.
Okay, that's another good way there's going to be many ways you can think of this, and I really like that interface. It really made sense to me when I saw in space with talk group, talk groups are assigned. I'm going to get there. So you need to choose the talk groups you want to participate on. This is where you might want to just put in everything that's on the local repeater. We don't have any Brandmeister repeaters over here, so we're talking about the basics of a basic Seabridge operation. So if you go to the DMR Virginia website, they only have about 15 channels, talk groups total, that they offer. They offer Virginia statewide, like I mentioned. Some of the local repeaters carry West Virginia statewide. There's the Tactical 312, Tactical 311, 310. Then there's 2 of what they call Virginia TAC channels, which are only available on the DMR Virginia affiliated repeaters. And those talk groups, I don't even remember the talk group numbers for them. And then, so Virginia TAC A and Virginia TAC B, good ones to have in your radio. And then you'll get a little bit farther down the list, and then you'll find that they'll carry the worldwide English group. So should you choose to activate that and participate in like one of the worldwide English nets or something like that, that ties together all the repeaters in English-speaking countries. Again, usually on the PTT timeout mode.
They also have Parrot, which I think is cool.
Parrot is like the Echo Test if you used Echo Link, and that one's cool because you can key up, it buffers your audio in, plays it back out to you over the channel, as well as any other repeater that's tuned to Parrot at the time, and you'll be able to hear your audio, kind of an audio test sort of thing. So the next, so pick out the talk groups you want to operate on, and then you're gonna open up the and again, every customer programming software is a little bit different. This teacher had their erasers as well. I think that's an eraser. So I'll just find a new area to write. So next you're gonna make your contact list. And your contact list is very simple. It has three columns and occasionally some other features like but at the very basic you have an ID number, text or name, which is the string that you would put in someone's call sign and name, and then you would have type, which tells the radio if it's a group or individual call. And then there is another column generally that'll say if you want like an alert to go off when that particular ID shows up on your receiver. So we're going to generate a talk group. So again, and in here we're going to have both types of group and individual. So generally at the top of the list, I'll start with the talk group IDs that I want to participate with. I mentioned them already: 3151, 312, going down the list. And a very important one is the local talk group, which means that the connection stops here. And when you operate on a local, some repeaters will just cut it and it's only local on the repeater. 27500 is the local talk group in this area. You'll only be tying up a local resource. So again, we talked about, with some of the modes, some of the talk groups you may be using could be hundreds of repeaters that all can listen in. The local gives you a little bit of local privacy, but you don't even tie up any network resources going out over the C bridges, even if no other repeaters are listening. So at the very bottom, there's a reminder: always use the lowest common denominator channel to talk to somebody on. If you're in the same town or down the street, use local because you'll only be tying up your local repeater. If you're doing Northern Virginia, use one of the Northern Virginia local ones. Virginia, no reason to use like one of the worldwide channels to talk to a guy in Roanoke, because you guys could both use the Virginia statewide and so on. Okay, so we've made our contact list. So that's the first thing we've created, is our list of calls, group calls and individual calls, which is step 6 and 7 on here. The next thing you need to do is, and I'm going to from here on out talk about operating on a repeater. I mentioned the individual calls, and I don't want to get too far into the nuances of that. The next thing that you need to do is you need to create a channel, and in almost every piece of software, the channels are set up where they have some overall channel information, and then they have TX and RX columns. I believe the RX is usually on the left and TX is on the right. So this is where you're going to assign the channel name, whatever you want to call it, and it has to be unique. So this would be Herndon, Virginia statewide versus Alexandria repeater, Virginia statewide. Everyone has to be different because it's going to show up in one massive list. So you're going to put things like the name. You're going to put, I didn't actually put on this sheet, but you're going to want to pay attention to the color code that the repeater operates on, which is like a PL tone overall, high level, like a PL tone. There might be 2 DMR repeaters operating in Virginia, both on the same frequency. The one down in Tidewater might use color code 13, while we use the color code 1 here. When the bits come into your receiver, and that very beginning is the color code identification, and it already recognizes to ignore that packet if it doesn't match what you put in here. So that's something that you want to pay attention to when you look at the repeater information from something like Repeater Book. So name and color code, and you're also going to assign which time slot you're operating on, because you have 2 complete talk paths in this system. And so you need to identify if you're on time slot 1 or time slot 2. Then just like when you're programming your radio, you need your RX frequency and then TX frequency for the RF, and sometimes there's a little calculator in here that you can just put like +5 megahertz, whatever, and it'll fill it in for you. That's the only thing you need to put in the receive side. On the transmit side, you need to make sure you put, now's where you're going to put your the group call that you're transmitting to. So for example, I'm going to continue to use the Virginia statewide example, 3151. And those are the basics. Those are the very basics for a channel. So I might have two channels. I might have two channels next to each other in my channel list, and they're exactly the same except for frequency and name, because I have a 3151 associated with Vienna and a 3151 associated with Richmond, and the frequencies are different and the name is different, but the TX group is the same. Is that making sense so far? Yeah.
I'd like to add a comment here. When you program your own code plug, it's very easy to get confused because it's a little different than what we're used to. And when people get confused, they tend to put the radio away in a box. I would recommend that you download the code plug from DMR, blah, 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 whatever it was.
DMR Virginia.
Virginia, which has all of these things already in there. And when you can get on the air and the enthusiasm spurs on, that's when you can start playing around with it.
I have copies of it here if anybody.
Yeah, I tell you, it's wonderful. It just gets you going right then and there.
It's a quick way to get started, and if you understand how to open up your CPS, all the better, because then you can go actually see what the cryptic 7-character channel name means. So I've made a channel, or I've downloaded a list of channels, and the next thing I need to do is, but then if I program this into the radio and I turn the radio on, I'm not gonna hear anything. I'm not gonna even see any channels to select. My channel knob will say all unprogrammed, and I'll get a loud, annoying tone. So the next thing you need to do is you take your list of channels, and you're gonna make you're gonna put together a zone. And so the zone is gonna basically, it's just a list, and I'm gonna say I want to include channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever these names were in that list. And then I can program it in the radio. And now when I turn on the radio, I can navigate to that zone. You usually you select the zone via the menu structure. You can also, a lot of the radios are all customizable. You can set up any of these buttons to be up and down, home zone, all these sorts of things. But very easily, you go into the menu, go down to the zones section and select which zone you've named it. In my case, it's zone. And then I hit select, and my radio is going to jump over to zone X, channel 1. And then channel 1 is already pre-configured with the name, the information. I already have the frequency set up. I have my talk group that I'm sending to set up. That maps back to a group call, and it fills in the from address with my user radio ID, individual radio ID that I put in at the very top of the whole code plug file. And when I press transmit, it pulls all that together and puts together a transmission. And if I change to channel 2 may be exactly 100% the same, except I'm now talking to the local group, which was 27500. And channel 3 may be 312. And then the rest of the magic happens on the server side, where it determines where it routes. Notice I didn't have to list anything. I'm not required to make a receive group list, so I didn't actually have to specify who I'm listening for. If you don't put anything in there and you leave it as the default, the radio is going to listen for activity on whatever group number is over here. There are options to make your own lists. So if you want to listen to 5 groups at the same time instead of just 1, you can do that. But that would be the next step. I wouldn't suggest starting right there. So, yeah.
I have 2 quick questions. Can we, as a club, set up, I don't know the right term, a talk group just for Vienna Wireless members that would work through a Vienna Wireless repeater, for example?
You can.
Or work Simplex, maybe a second one that would work Simplex if we're at Ampfest or something.
Yeah, and you could make this, you could use the same number both times.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to register that. I believe DMR Mark manages a group of them. Their website's on here.
Okay.
And Brandmeister is the other one, especially for people with hotspots. And these Seabridge operators can reach into the Brandmeister network and offer some of the Brandmeister talk groups as well.
All right.
So your question is, you could create your own club talk group for sure.
Okay.
You would contact the individual repeater owners around here. You'd reach out to Virginia statewide and say, hey, or specifically you could reach out to the Linden repeater operator, N8RAT, and he also operates the Fredericksburg repeater. And you reach out to Steve locally and say, hey, we've got this talk group that we kind of like the local one, but it's for our club and we want to hold a net here, do some activity here. Would you mind carrying our talk group? And they would just turn that talk group on and set up the routes between the different repeaters.
Okay. Second question. I did what Ray, I'm code plug challenged. So I did what Ray did. I downloaded the DMR Virginia. I loaded it. Okay. There's some unprogrammed channels in there.
Uh-huh.
Can I program an analog repeater like our club repeater into one of those?
You can.
Okay. That's all I need to know.
Yeah. Ray, a next step for you and for anyone who's downloaded the DMR Virginia code plug, which I recommend is a great place to start. The next thing you can do is make your own zones, because a channel can fall into more than one zone. For example, there's nothing stopping you from having a zone that has a couple channels from, you could have a zone of a few channels from each repeater, or however you want to section it up. If you go to, if you have a route that you drive every day, or if you commute down to Richmond or something and you want to put 5 in there, so all you have to do is you go south, just change the channel knob within your zone. You can do anything you want in that configuration. So that's a good next step.
Not to confuse your otherwise excellent presentation, and Ben, I want to say that it's very good, especially since I am battle scarred with having to do this. I found that in my home QTH, I couldn't hit the repeaters very well. So I did what a lot of people apparently have done. I put the money out for an open spot, a hotspot. Oh, how sweet it is. Because all of a sudden the whole world opened up to me. And that $200 and whatever for that little piece of plastic that I had to put in there, it was worth it.
Okay.
And I just wanted to point out to you that once you master what Ben has said here, and then you go to work on your open spot, a whole nother set of Excedrin headaches. But it can be done. There are a lot of good YouTube videos out there, and it took me one day to set it up, and it's wonderful. I just wanted to support what you're saying there.
So setting up your own hotspot is very popular to do, especially as you mentioned if you want to have more channels available than just what's locally offered, or you want to have your own. You would choose a frequency to operate on. They're not coordinated. They're like, I think these things are 200 milliwatts. It covers your house to your UHF portable. Some people actually use them on their cell phones tethered in the back, and they put them in the trunk of their car and then drive around and talk from their portable into the back of the car. If anybody wants
to see one, I have one with me tonight. I can show it to you.
Put it on a battery and run up a flagpole. Wow. Whatever you need to do, and then you can operate all of those Brandmeister repeaters talk groups, which there are hundreds of them, and there are some, even as I understand, they've come out with some that are more like technical focused. So they'll have there's non-regional or English-speaking ones. There's like DMR hobbyists.
Pretty much any topic you can think of, there's a talk group associated for it on Brandmeister, literally.
Sure. So you'd operate on one of those at a time from your house, but you only have one radio, so you only need to listen to one at a time. So this is the very basics of how to get in the area. I can, if I'm allowed to stay in this room for a little while, I can help people individually.
Absolutely. We do encourage people to move over to the main meeting, but we can spend a little bit of time.
With specific questions. Did everybody learn something?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
My email address is good in QRZ. What is it? .net. So you can drop me an email, or Brendan's on the Vienna Wireless General Listserv, and having a chain on there, the people can bounce questions around, might be helpful, and I can pipe in there if needed. And if any other general questions right now? Yeah.
do as great as I can, but perform as managed as I can. If I have a channel for, say, Virginia statewide, and I create a contact for Virginia statewide, and then I create a channel on a local repeater that has just Virginia statewide in it.
The channel will only have one talk group in it. All channels, yeah.
You're right.
Uh-huh.
No, I said it
It's
wrong.
fine, no problem.
If I'm tuned to that channel, will I hear any other talk groups?
No,
Just the one that's programmed for the channel.
that's right.
My radio has a feature or something called an RX group.
Okay.
And are you familiar with that?
Yes.
If I put other talk groups in the RX group, will it hear those even though the channel is just for the one talk group?
When you set up your channel in there, but put as many channels as you want into your RX group, and then if you define that group, it will open squelch for anything that falls in that list. So that's a little bit more of an advanced.
The channel will only transmit on the one.
It'll only transmit on the one, but it'll listen on multiple ones.
Listen on all of them.
I used an example, you can look back at the video from last time. I used an example of like operating a public safety event where you have your net control operator wants to listen to everybody, but be able to choose on his radio if he's transmitting to the north byte team or the south byte team. So I think they want everybody to move to your meeting. Is that your plan?
Well, we're just out of time here.
Yep,
so
I think
if you
so.
want to stick around, you can. If you want to move over there, you can.
Send me an email
Applause,
or
please,
something like that.
applause.
Okay.
Sure.